Hi everyone, good morning and good afternoon wherever you're joining us from. My name is Kate Kavanagh. I'm General Manager at AIM Group. At AIM Group, we provide business intelligence covering automotive marketplaces, and we do this through our content, our conferences and our consulting. Before we get started, I want to say a huge thank you to Kaisa, who are our sponsors today. And some housekeeping as well, just to let you know, this is being recorded and you will receive the recording in a few days once it's ready. Please ask your questions as we go. You'll be able to submit them in the chat. Before we get started with what's going to be a great discussion today, I know, we're going to have a short video from our sponsor, Kaisa, and I'll see you at the end to wrap up. Enjoy.
Hello, welcome to what promises, by the look of the sign-ups, to be our biggest ever webinar. I'm Jonathan Turpin, Principal at the AIM Group, and I'm going to welcome on stage my guests, Martin, Steve and Anoop. Please come on stage. Hopefully they'll arrive sooner or later. Brilliant. Today, we're going to focus primarily on the question of whether AI and in particular AI agents will fundamentally change or disrupt auto marketplaces. So that's the topic for the day. Maybe my three guests can introduce yourselves briefly and your businesses. Perhaps start with Steve and then on to Anoop and then finally Martin.
Sure, great. Steve Greenfield from Automotive Ventures. I'm really excited to be here, Jonathan. Thank you for arranging this. It's going to be a great conversation today. We invest early stage, so we're investing in early stage mobility companies around the globe and trying to then energize their growth. So excited to be here today.
And my name is Anoop Tiwari. I was with Cars Commerce or Cars.com for about 2 decades, doing strategy, corporate development, product partnership, analytics, whole range of things. And these days I am with A9i, which is a consulting and advisory services company. And I work with digital businesses, helping them find growth faster. Even though it doesn't start there, many of my projects involve AI, and it is helping us reimagine the old workflows and improved customer experiences, which were just not possible in the past. Delighted to be here.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm Martin Schwarzmann. I'm a partner with OCNC. We're a fairly strategy-focused consulting firm. We do a few things. We'd like to think that we do them well. I look after AI for the firm. So that means obviously I look into the crystal ball a bit further than others, and I usually get pinged on what the 3 to 5 year horizon looks like, which is a very hard to predict one, but one that we definitely need to have answers on as a consulting firm to our clients. Within that, my sector specialty is media, wider media. There are definitely excuse me. Experts in our firm that know marketplaces and auto marketplaces better than me. I would partner with them to tackle the AI questions usually.
Brilliant. Welcome all three of you. I want to start with the consumer, and I'm going to pop the first question to Anoop. What do you think the consumer will be doing differently in 2030 when looking for a used car, and how will AI have changed the search and buying journey?
Yeah, and I mean, when I look back in the last 20, 25 years or so, a lot has changed, but a lot has remained the same. I mean, you visit any automotive website and you'll find the standard make model drop down with some location entry point, right? And I think that's set for a change in all 3 stages. So discovery, decision making, and the deal. We should expect substantial change in how users interact with website content and how they make decisions. On the discovery, most websites provide a large plethora of options for searching and filtering, and we leave it on the consumers to essentially express whatever their intent is and hunt and peck and find those buttons to get the right results. I think that's probably going to change in form of more natural, more fluid conversations with the website, describing what they want and get the results that they really care about. So I think discovery is going to change how consumers enter the website content. On the decision-making side, the data crunching part, like figuring out exactly what is the optimal fit for the query, there is probably great opportunity, but there is still a need for trust and brand and actual interaction with the physical vehicle. On the deal making side, I would say consumers love shopping. They hate car buying. They enjoy imagining themselves in different cars, but they don't like talking to a lot of dealers and negotiating and feeling that anxiety of pulling the trigger and writing that final check. So I think there is a clear possibility at some point in the future where there's a personal shopping agent interacting with the dealer's selling agent and clearing off some of these mechanics in a more fluid manner, at least for a small portion of audiences. That's my guess.
Okay, and when it comes to marketplaces, do you think consumers are going to be spending more time or less time on marketplaces in their own journey?
I think it'll vary by the persona. There are consumers like me who've been in the automotive category for 20 years but don't care that much about cars. So for them, it's a means of transportation, and they want to get their transactions. They're interested in just making a decision and moving on. But then there's a substantial portion for them, cars are their identity. They want to spend time looking at images, looking at description, and thinking about it far more deeply. So on the whole, I would expect it's. I mean, in these situations, either you could say the transformation will follow the same patterns of the past, like it happened with computation or mobility or internet, or you could say I have no idea how things will change, and you'll probably be true on both sides. My current assessment is that most likely the overall time spent on car shopping will go down, but it is unclear right now whether that interaction with the chatbot-like experience is going to happen on the third-party standard horizontal LLMs, or will it happen with the Gen AI-powered search experiences on marketplaces? My bet is on the latter.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that later. Steve or Martin, anything you want to add at this stage, or can I press on into the world of AI agents?
Press on.
I'll do that.
Press on, Jonathan.
Martin, what does your analysis suggest personal AI agents will be capable of by 2030? And what level of consumer adoption do you expect at that stage? And when you think specifically about auto marketplaces, do you see personal AI agents being just as capable as marketplaces in helping a consumer find or buy a used car by the time we get to 2030?
Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. So in general, I'm fairly bullish on the capability of AI agents. I think we have very little reason to believe that technology-wise there will be a standstill or idleness. Many times people have said AI capability has stalled only to be hit in the face with the next news the week after. So we know that the current technologies can scale quite a bit further. We know that pretty much everything that is verifiable or where steps are verifiable are within the realm of what AI can solve. And we also know that the next step after that is simulating and computer use. And we can get quite far with AI using made for human interfaces to really interact with websites, with experiences, and get undistracted to the goal that the user kind of pursuing. So in the near term, we obviously have a couple of big players that are likely to be big players in the consumer AI agent space. So with Apple, obviously announced that last year, didn't deliver on the promise. Google announced that last month and showed some really quite compelling examples where your personal agents makes calls out to your local service provider around the corner. I am quite bullish specifically to Google. They have a little bit of magic sauce with their Alpha Evolve program. So technically, I think they will get there. And it's fairly safe to say that by 28, simulation and computer use is pretty solved at the very least. And beyond that, it gets even harder to predict, but AI capability progresses also on everything else that people do and understands the world better.
And when you say simulation, you mean the AI being able to do anything a normal human can do on the computer. So
correct, yeah. So exactly, interacting with interfaces, reacting to things that it can see, and doing just larger and larger work steps. So I predict in general that, like maybe to the second part of your question on auto marketplaces, that fewer and fewer users in general will use websites themselves, but they will have their agents interact with websites, especially for complex journeys, and at the very least as an enhancement to their experience, where they get more information, they get to the right information, they get a second pair of eyes, they get their AI uncle who knows about cars to help them with that experience and give them tips and tricks. That I think for all complex journeys, not using AI, I think is hard to imagine. I think just like as a starting point of the journey and the discovery and inspiration part, AI is definitely a starting point, and AI will not just be text, right? AI will be able to draw together the images that it sees around the web. It obviously knows about the consumer and their personal preferences, so it is 100% the more convenient channel, and most likely a bit more personalized and engaging. On the engaging part, I'm not 100%, but on the personalized, I'm 80%.
And that kind of multimodal capability, pulling together text, images, etc. I mean, I always imagine it as, almost having your virtual estate agent showing you the home. Is that a 2030 thing, or is that going to be beyond that?
So I think this is probably not too far out in certain domains. I'm not entirely sure if it applies to all domains. By domains, I'm broadly a field. So we already see, like, let's say Notebook LM, who gives you like a multimodal summary of a topic and gives you some images and some text, or gives you a simulated podcast that can nowadays also can change in length. It used to be like 15 minutes always. Now it can be a 1-minute podcast summary of what it just saw and learned. Whichever way is most appealing to the context of the user and the attention of the user, it's quite possible that we'll get there very quickly.
And last quick question, what % of consumers are going to be using these personal agents in 2030?
I think the safe answer, which I think is way too conservative, is the normal Rogers curve, right? So you have the first movers, you have the early majority, and yada, 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 as we work through the majority of people. I think we have seen with AI prompt-based and chatbot kind of interfaces that even though it's a text-based interface and it feels very much chatbots from the early 2000s or late 90s, it probably has broken already into the beyond the early majority, beyond the first 17-18% of the population. We have hundreds of millions of monthly active users in OpenAI alone. Perplexity and Google Gemini are a bit harder to guess, but net new users on top. So I think we're already in the majority. So anyone who thinks that this is not going to find mass adoption, I think this is not compatible with what we're seeing right now with the first wave.
So that makes me feel like it's 80% plus of people will be using agents in 2030.
Well, not necessarily for every use case, but either the things that require high convenience and I trust my agent to do it, or I need a second pair of eyes, and the more complex journeys, I think I take any help I can get navigating such a costly endeavor as buying a car or renting a car or anything in that journey. I would use any help I can get personally.
Great. So Steve, we've got these kind of AI agents charging towards us over the next 5 years. What do you think is going to, looking at this from the marketplace's perspective, what do you think are going to be the real challenges this creates for them, and what do you think some of the things they need to do now to kind of get ahead might be?
Yeah, sure. That's also a lot to unpack. But I'll echo what I heard from Anoop and Martin here. I think that looking back 15 years ago when I was at Auto Trader and I was competing directly with Anoop, I think the big vision was, could we provide a persistent shopping agent for the consumer to help them unpack this really complex, transaction and negotiation process that's really painful for the consumer. That's all, I think, always been a vision for marketplaces around the world, is could you actually provide that shopping agent, and through that process become very sticky with the consumer, right? Making sure that you kind of quote unquote own their whole shopping journey and bring them back time and time again as inventory gets refreshed, et cetera. The marketplaces haven't done a good job. I don't know there's any marketplace, Jonathan, you would know better than me, around the world that's built a good shopping agent that consumers trust. And here we are now. We're on the cusp of having a persistent shopping agent that's going to be on every single device that we use, that we are over time, to Martin's point, going to get the trust. And why wouldn't we push off the painful negotiation process to this persistent shopping agent? So I think we'll see a dramatic tipping point, and especially around car shopping, consumers will be like, well, why wouldn't I just have my trusted uncle, as Martin said, or my neighbor that I trust next door, except it's going to be, all knowing and all seeing, and be able to crawl all data out there and help me with all of that. So I think that that's going to be a challenge that the marketplaces can adopt. I think most relevantly right now, we're seeing Google under attack. So I suspect that the marketplaces that have benefited from having cheap or free traffic from SEO, we're seeing what's happening in Google's ecosystem, right? They're monkeying around with AI. They're pushing down SEM and SEO into less relevance. You're seeing websites that are literally going out of business because they've lost that organic traffic. That's going to be a phenomenon that's going to continue, because Google is going to have to protect their business first. Hell be damned, the marketplaces, right? They're going to have to protect their business first before they worry about whether or not they're continuing to generate good, cheap SEO traffic, or even provide paid advertising clicks into the marketplaces. So the marketplaces are going to have to immediately start to say, okay, well, if our traffic's going to start to decline because SEO goes away, how are we going to backfill that traffic? Or is our cost of acquisition of consumers going to go up overall? And then the last thing I'll say, back to my first point, is that I do think you're going to start to see consumers rely on these bots, and therefore there'll be bots on your sites, not consumers. And you look at the sort of perverse incentives that marketplaces have with this prominence advertising model. It's to keep the consumer on the site as long as possible, view as many SRPs and VDPs as possible, and keep them coming back. Well, the ideal shopping experience is the bot goes on there once, it gets all the data that it needs to synthesize some really good recommendations back to the shopper, and then you may never see the bot again. And you definitely don't have the opportunity to get the consumer on and say, oh, look, there's a Ferrari, right? Let me click on that ad. And so I think that trying to keep the consumer within the ecosystem bouncing around, generating value events, and then trying to translate those value events back to the car dealer to have them pay more, this may change very, very quickly. So the two buckets I would put it into is, be very aware of your organic traffic off of Google specifically, and anticipate that's going to continue to shrink, maybe quickly. And then also think sort of in a world where the bots are interacting with your content and not the consumers, what that's going to do to your prominence model that you're selling back to your paying advertisers, which are mostly car dealers.
So that sounds like a kind of fairly bleak picture for marketplaces. I mean, what do you do to stop that happening and keep the business as your business?
Well, one is, especially marketplaces that dominate in their local market, they have the data, right? So it's the opportunity for them to forge the relationship with these chatbots to say, look, I'm going to let you into my ecosystem and get access to my data, but let's write the rules of engagement here. So I imagine we'll talk, and Martin's an expert around these protocols that are starting to be established to be able to communicate with bots, right? But we are entering an era here where you're going to have to make sure that you've got the data, you've got the best data, and it's indexable for these chatbots. The other part is, as we all know, it's easier said than done to transact a car online. I mean, this is a multifaceted, challenging, painful experience to negotiate a car deal. And so I think that, as Jonathan, you would have said a couple of years ago, marketplaces are starting to evolve more to be transactable. I think, the more areas or elements of the car deal they can own And the more they can bring, the consumer closer to a transactable transaction, the more value they're going to be able to create on both sides of the equation, to the consumer and these bots that are shopping, but in parallel to the advertisers. If they bring a more qualified transact-ready lead, ultimately delivering a transactable consumer to a car dealer, they're going to be willing to pay more for that consumer.
Okay, so they've got to go further down the value chain in what they're delivering to the dealer.
I believe so. Yeah.
Anoop, I cut you off a second ago. You were going to say something.
No, that's perfectly all right. I was just going to add to what Steve was saying, that the message to marketplaces would be, from my side, that OpenAI is your friend, but ChatGPT, in the best case scenario, is a frenemy. In the worst case, it's a mortal enemy, right? So it's all about the battle for attention. And I think marketplaces can deliver a much deeper, richer experiences than what a ChatGPT or a Claude can do, but they'll have to act urgently. And they have the same capabilities available to them. In addition to that, they have the deep experience in a particular vertical. They have a deep understanding of how consumers shop, the relationship with the dealers, and I think they have to take advantage of all that. To Steve's point, because the volume of the consumer will change, but also the quality of the consumer will change. So it's not the same customer. Like, imagine 20 years back, when consumers are walking into a dealership, they did not know as much as they know today about their alternatives, and they're not as ready to buy as they are today. Just played forward, they're more likely to be even more set in their mind about comparing all the options and trusting a really strong model and being confident about the decision.
Does that mean you've also, marketplaces are generally about active search. They're actually, I would argue, weak in discovery. A lot of the discovery happens before you get to the marketplace. Do they need to push back into discovery?
I think it varies. In my opinion, so on the new car side and the used car side, discovery happens a little bit differently. On the used car side, I think Steve has seen the same numbers over years. A lot of discovery and research actually happens engaging with the listings itself. They're going back and forth between the vehicle detail page and search results page, looking for that one specific thing they have in the mind, and they're looking at 75 different filter options to find that. So they're converting this sort of latent inherent desire into some sort of a structured query so websites can answer. I think that barrier will become much more easily surmountable.
Okay, so Martin, can I ask you, in general, do you think specialist or generalist agents will win in these kind of areas? And how do you see that interaction happening between the two of them?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So I think in general, the generalist agent of your choice, of your trust, will have most data on you, will know most about you. You don't have to re-enter like your personal information. And I don't think that your agent of choice, let's say it's your operating system agent on Apple, on an iOS device, your Apple Intelligence Pro, whatever, is perfectly incentivized to do the right job by you. It will always try to do the best job by you with the minimum, the least effort it can do, because obviously this still takes time and attention, and it wants to serve the user with a quick answer that can be done in a freemium kind of model. So I think the general model will be good enough. There might be times when a specialized model has access to better data sources. A specialized model might be integrated into some kind of workflow that is more thought out, but that will usually be a temporary phenomenon, I would predict, because of how AI has worked over the last couple of years. We have learned that the general models distill the specialized models. They learn from all the specific subjects and then incorporate that into the big into the big model. So I think general will win midterm. That's what we've seen in all kinds of things. Even the examples like driverless cars, right? So you have a fully specialized model that can drive cars. Not very well is that, but not good enough. But the moment you mix that with a large language model, who has understanding of context and can look at images and like can deal with all the things that like real world throws at them, like the self-driving models become significantly better because it has all this context from all the other domains. So yeah, just more examples to like support my point.
So does that, does that mean that, will you, say I'm a brand like, Mobile in Germany or Auto Trader in the UK, is the consumer going to see my brand? Is the specialist agent or specialist capability going to appear within the generalist, or is it literally a conversation where the data is gathered from the specialist and taken into the generalist, and the generalist does what it wants with it?
I think that there's some prediction in there, but I think these models right now, they still rely on third-party trust and trust that these brands provide. They're also sensitive. So if you ask the model without access to internet, what are the big auto platforms in Germany, it will probably come up with the most known brands in the market, and therefore they are biased by brands to some extent. But at the same time, it will not just check the top one brand. It will check the top 2 or 3 brands because it's at no extra effort and makes the user's query potentially more complete in the response or better. And why wouldn't it? So I think, yes, the trust is helpful, but the trust of a second or third tier brand in a market is probably still good enough.
Okay, so Steve, I guess we've seen auto marketplaces are winner takes most businesses. Do you think we're now going to get a position where the number 2s and number 3s can really get a leg up through this capability of interacting with the generalist AIs?
Yeah, I mean, the branding question, or will it resonate, or will the consumer even care, is an interesting one. I suspect that I'm going to trust whatever brand chatbot that I've got. I'm going to rely on this thing. It's going to understand me. It'll be like my soulmate. I'll be very intimate with this thing, maybe not literally, but figuratively. And once I trust this thing, it's not really going to matter where it's getting the data from as much. It's going to be different, if I want a pair of Nikes. But when I'm shopping a car, I mean, I care more about the brand of the car and maybe even sort of the transference of the quality and brand of the dealer I'm buying from. But the marketplace kind of becomes an intermediary brand that is of less interest to me. I'm just like, this thing is aggregating and making recommendations. So I think that there is going to be tension. And then back to answer your question, Jonathan, it does kind of provide a unique opportunity for the number 2, number 3 players in the space if they can outmaneuver the big guys, the big elephant in the room, by establishing relationships with these chatbots, making sure the data schema is structured in such a way that they're optimizing and allowing the chatbots to get access to the data, and then figure out if there's clever angles to get closer to the transaction, provide more facets of the data that's going to be needed to be able to configure the car deal. I do worry that all the branding we see, television ads, et cetera, from these big marketplaces might become increasingly irrelevant if more of the traffic, and it will, comes from chatbots that aren't necessarily going to index or care that there is an exciting, ad on football on Saturday night or whatever it might, or hockey or whatever country you're in. It's going to be less influenced by the passion of like, oh, I love that commercial, and more just like, can I find the data that I need? Is it in a structure that I can extract? And then, who seems to have the most credible, high quality data, which would lead me to believe that there is kind of this unique opportunity for the number 2 and number 3 players in markets to maybe compete. Maybe it will level the playing field a bit.
Okay, we've only got a couple more minutes before, so I'm going to jump to the big question, ask all 3 of you, looking really for a yes/no answer more than anything. Will either, and it sounds more likely to be the big native AI companies disrupting. Do you think they will disrupt the auto marketplaces? And when I say disrupt, I mean, it could be just disrupt them substantially commercially, or it could be totally overturn them. Are you believers that the auto marketplaces will win through and sustain their business models?
I can go first, Jonathan. My position is that it's yes for consumer. There'll be fragmentation of attention, and no for their revenue model. So I think they'll be fine. In my opinion, especially the larger auto marketplaces, especially the ones who have distinct advantage over the number two and have a strong brand awareness and have a slightly different take than Steve on that, they'll be fine.
Okay, well, we'll come back in a minute and ask you why, top two specific things that you think will sustain them. Steve?
Yeah, I think these marketplaces have proven to have a durable and defensible business model that will continue in the future. I worry more about the monetization model. Many of them have extracted a lot of revenue from their advertisers through this prominence model that, for all the reasons I said earlier, may not be as effective in the future. You have to think of what you're selling back to the advertisers. What are the quote unquote value events in a world where more of your traffic is going to be bots? Less of those consumers are going to be bouncing around. You aren't going to be able to convince them to stay on your site. So I think we have to give a lot of thought and keep a close eye on the monetization of these marketplaces might be under duress.
Okay. Martin, disruption or are they going to win through?
I fully agree with Anoop and Steve on the search, discovery, and obviously less attention being happening on those platforms. I do think the market making and the connection between buyer and seller, these platforms stay relevant, especially that out of the other marketplace verticals, there's more C2C inventory happening, which is unlikely to go direct from seeker to seller. So that's probably a bit of a mode. But obviously the ability to monetize customers if they're less on your platform and you have less consumer data on them because they don't leave a data trail on your page anymore. And being if the inventory is on the second best platform, it probably will still find a way to pretty much every buyer. So that still will put pressure on margin, exactly as Steve said. I can't imagine it in many other ways. And then we get to the other questions next.
It's sounding like we've still got marketplaces, but potentially substantially less profitable marketplaces, particularly at the kind of number one end. So one last thing from each of you, because we've really got to cut away. But one thing, the top thing you'd be doing as a marketplace to make sure that you sustain your position. Steve?
Yeah, so I would say three things. One is your source of organic traffic, scrutinize that, prepare for a fallback plan. Number two is, make sure that you've got the highest quality data and you've structured it in such a way that the bots can access it very easily. And then think through sort of this monetization model and what you're going to do in the future. I think that probably will lead you to how do I get closer to the transaction and hold back secret sauce that the bots are going to need from me. But I think that challenge your own monetization model in a world where much more of your traffic's coming through bots that aren't going to be distracted by your monetization model.
So data behind, private data that's high value that isn't simply accessible to the bots. Yeah. Martin, what for you? Biggest
I think these are great suggestions. I'll follow that, of course. I do think there comes a time when the most advantaged players in the markets are probably those who hold supply. So how do I cater more and provide value-added services that sellers can't live without is probably the main thing, and it's probably more tricky to deliver a better user interface and a better user experience to vis-a-vis an agent who is obviously very good at that. So it's probably the supply side is the one to play to, and there are models for that. There are models, of course, in the digital advertising stack, right? So there are sell-side platforms that provide capabilities, that provide enrichment, that provide extra information that the buyer or seeker needs to make a better decision or a more informed decision. And I want to be that provider. And I want to basically help maximize the revenue potential for suppliers. Now, that's not exactly compatible with the current model. So that's why you need to kind of have your ear on the market and be ready to an oven-ready solution, let's say in 2 to 3 years from now, that you can pull out of the hat the moment this becomes the dominant way and your current model doesn't cut through.
Okay, Anoop, really super quick, just one point additional to that, and then we need to cut away.
Okay. I would say go deeper with your sellers and be even more vigilant about what data you want to expose to AI bots and what you want to hold back on. Go back and review all the metrics that you currently use to prove value for packages, because they're going to change dramatically. And do everything you can to improve AI proficiency in your employee base, because they will be the ones who will figure out what the next experience should look like.
Like that one, really nice. So we're going to go off screen now, and our sponsor Kaisa is going to come on for 2-3 minutes, and then we'll be back to answer questions. There are lots of questions in the chat. Please add your questions in the chat. So we'll see you in 2 minutes. We're going off screen.
Hey there. Oh, hey, Steve. So hi, my name is Aditya, and as Jonathan just introduced me, we are the sponsors of this webinar. But then today we have very little to actually share about our product because we did a deep dive into what this whole AI future is going to look like. And to be very transparent, it's very nerve-wracking to actually make any form of predictions, especially when it's a recorded webinar with such a huge turnout, because most AI predictions so far that we've seen in the past have aged poorly, sort of like fine milk in some ways. So we wanted to ground it a little bit down to the fundamentals of what technological advance in the past has meant, whether it's AI or anything else, even flying. It all comes down to improving and elevating human experiences. And Anup quite brilliantly mentioned about going deep into understanding what dealers really want and to expose the right level of data. And I completely agree with that. And most of what we're going to talk about today is also revolving around that data in itself. When you look at human experiences and elevating human experiences from a marketplace's perspective, you could look at it as the elevation of your customer experience, not just your buyers, but most importantly, your dealers as well, because they're the ones paying for you today. I will just put my slides on the screen just to show you some information. So we work with quite a few marketplaces in the automotive industry and also some OEMs, which means that we work with about 80% of European automotive dealers, which means we've got a lot of data flowing through us and will be the foundation of what I'm going to present today. What we've seen is that in order to understand and improve customer experience in the future, you need to fully understand the challenges that they're facing. And one of the things that we've noticed is that dealer response times make a big, big difference in terms of how quickly they can convert. And a challenge as far as the dealer is concerned is about selling the car by the end of the day. And there's a positive correlation between how quickly they respond. It could be 60% if they respond within just a minute, and less than a percentage if they respond after a day, which is a huge difference. And another interesting point is that 78% of buyers today end up purchasing from the first dealer who responds to their leads. And it's a matter of reality that today dealers take about 56 minutes, almost an hour to respond in EU. And this data is actually from our own platform and also third-party data that's available, which means the conversion possibility is around 20 to 25% today. And while it's not terrible, it's certainly not as good as it could potentially be. Most of the best marketplaces that we work with, that I personally work with, are quite aware of this fact and are doing a lot to go further. And they understand that dealers are not always just ignoring leads. Some of them are, but most of them are just overwhelmed because there's so many processes involved, so many steps involved. And coming back to what I said initially, any prediction that we make about AI or any technology in its own way will not be super accurate in terms of how it'll fix the challenge. But then what it's trying to do is to simplify the human experience, the customer experience, the overall friction that a buyer has to face while purchasing a car. Like Anup mentioned, they don't necessarily like the process of purchasing a car. Similarly, dealers also probably don't like the process of selling the car, but love the process of getting the check. And what AI will do for both buyers and sellers is to simplify this. And if we were to put this on a little timeline of sorts, you could see that at present, and I'm trying to ground everything into present reality and also show what's going to happen in the future. At present, some of the best marketplaces that we work with are using advanced engagements. to engage with their buyers, also with their dealers. And AI is sort of like a smart co-pilot of sorts, smoothing the process, making sure that they understand the context of the conversation through things like speech analytics and data analytics, etc. In the near future, and I might just say tomorrow for that matter, because Apple recently introduced something called as a call screener, it would be lead qualification. So instead of sending a lot of leads to the dealers, could be good and bad, there could be a lead qualification process where AI now becomes in the middle of the process, that it moves from just being a spectator to between these two parties, and qualifying the lead before it actually is being sent to the dealer. And Apple, like I said, has released something called a screen caller, where when you're getting a personal call, the AI assistant would actually just screen whether it's a real conversation, a real person, or some kind of a bot. And finally, the future. And it's funny to call it the future because it's just about a couple of years into the future, literally. It would possibly be like the panelists mentioned, agentic conversations, where it's no longer human buyer and human dealer. We spoke about assistance of the buyers interacting with the platform, but it might as well be the assistance of the dealers as well being involved in this whole process, where the agent of the buyer speaks to the agent of the dealer, gets all the fundamental information about the car. Is it available? Is it has it driven a lot of miles? Is it working perfectly well? And then set up a meeting for them to actually go and test drive the car. Because ultimately, it's not just about purchasing the car. It's also about what's going to happen after you purchase the car, the service quality, the relationship that they will have with the dealer. So we don't truly believe that everything will be run by machines in the next 5 years. But we believe that the role of marketplace would become even more significant if they're able to understand the challenges of today. You will be able to also predict the disruptions that AI could potentially bring about in the future. Instead of focusing too much on the exact solution, let's look at the overall problem that your dealers and buyers are facing and potentially where you need to really work on to get that smoothened out. So I know I've gone ahead of my time limit, but then I hope it was useful. Thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to speak to you after the webinar. That's it.
Do you want to stay on stage as well? Can I welcome Steve and Martin and Anoop back as well? So we've got quite a lot of questions. So I'm going to shoot the first one to Anoop. Oh, Anoop, he arrives.
I'm back.
So Anoop, should it be a priority for marketplaces to build their own specialist AI agents while the LLMs are growing and developing?
Sorry, to be sure, the question was, should marketplaces build their own agents or wait for the horizontals to do it? I think all of the above. So in my opinion, they should be working closely to figure out which of their APIs should be available through Model Context Protocol MCPs to the agents. But in parallel, when consumers do land on their property, whether it's website, mobile app, what can they do to present their own agents, which is richer and capable, more capable than a typical horizontal agent? One of the big problems, Jonathan, as you know, is most marketplaces have struggled to get a large portion of their consumers to create profiles and save vehicles in garage and things like that, which is not an issue for horizontal agents. So whatever they can do to collaborate, it'll improve the customer experience.
And I guess there's a kind of secondary question in my mind. I mean, actually consumers seem quite happy with car search as it is. Do we think they all want to go this route of agentic kind of search, or actually are a lot of them just going to carry on doing what the habit has been for the last 20 odd years?
Most of them would carry on until they see for the first time how magical it can be. So I think consumers are not expected to know the solution. They're expected to basically express their problem. I think it's up to us to show them how it can be solved better. Just because we've had the filters and the standard drop-downs for 20 plus years doesn't mean the future will remain the same. I think it's ripe for change.
Okay, so a question I'm going to shoot at Martin. Does this change the business model for marketplaces? I mean, traditionally, auto marketplaces either charge subscriptions, very occasionally listing fees, very occasionally lead fees. Are these sustainable models, or do they need to look at a transition to a different business model?
I think that's a question better placed with some real marketplace experts, either here in the panel or in my firm. I think there will be less time spent, there's less ability to bias your users. AI on your platform, which might be the case for a significant share of the users coming to your platform where it's a bot representing them, will not be easily biased, will not follow irrational or semi-rational suggestions, and therefore you can't easily steer them. So I think the objective should be to obviously do a monetization model that aligns with the seller's incentives, the dealer's incentives, but at the same time is compatible with a potentially dwindling attention.
So that sounds more like a commission or a lead fee. And I'm going to put this one to Steve as well, because I think it's one of the really crucial questions. Are the existing models sustainable, or do you need to transition in some form?
Well, I mean, if you believed 100% of your traffic was going to be bot traffic, then clearly you need to transition. I think it's worth, war rooming this now to prepare to, as Martin said earlier, have that solution in your back pocket to be able to pull out if and when we have this tipping point. But listen, at the end of the day, marketplaces are intermediaries, right? So you've got a consumer who wants to buy a car, and you've got a seller who has the car. And in the middle, you're kind of like playing matchmaker. And to Anoop's point, I just think the faceted search now is 25 years old, and it's going to have to evolve if more of the traffic is coming through chatbots. But I'll say this to your point, Jonathan. So if you think as a marketplace, we're creating anxiety because the business model is going to change. Imagine the poor dealer who's trying to sell a car.
Yeah.
Right. So the things I said earlier, their SEO is going to decrease to their website. Right. They're trying to figure out, should I continue to use marketplaces, or is there another way? And they're in this fog of war. Right. So nothing's going to be clear to them. I mean, at least with the marketplaces, they have strategy teams and they have resources. The average dealer is going to rely on their vendors, their partners, marketplaces to help them navigate through this fog of war. So I think you need to think through, one, what are you going to do as a marketplace? But more importantly, have empathy for your customer, the paying dealer, to say, how are they going to continue to be able to leverage you to get access to those consumers that may be using bots? And obviously in the middle, if you are able to provide value, continue to be an effective matchmaker, you'll be able to monetize the sellers, because the poor dealers are going to be sitting here going, oh my goodness, now I really don't understand how the consumer is evolving here, but they're not going to be able to navigate this by themselves, which provides a unique opportunity for you to continue to help your paying customers, the dealers, navigate through this changing consumer activity.
To Steve's point, Jonathan, even Google Business Profile that's been around for decades now, and anybody can easily go in and edit and create. Dealers don't do that themselves. Their agencies help them, their marketplaces help them.
Yeah.
So imagine Model Context Protocol is foreign language to them, right?
So that opportunity for deeper services actually includes more sophisticated AI marketing services on a broader basis, among other things.
Yeah, but it might be independent of the transaction platform, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at, because dealers will get support from someone. To be on multiple platforms, or to access the demand in the cheapest possible way, in a way that maximizes clearing and experience. So, but experience is secondary, of course. So someone will help them, and you obviously are advantaged because you have, as a marketplace incumbent, because you have the data, you have trust. So yeah, don't squander it.
Okay, I'm going to throw this one at Aditya. So what role is AI going to play in optimizing lead response and AI engagement? Not AI engagement, dealer engagement.
Well, yeah, might as well. Well, for optimizing, I think it's something that we touched upon at Autosbus earlier this year. The more personalized the engagement is, the better it's going to be for the buyer to stick to your platform, because you're sending them something that's relevant to their search and their endeavor to actually purchase a car. When it comes to dealers, you need to be able to tell them what this lead is calling for, because dealers spend hours and hours speaking to a poor quality lead, which is just money left on the table because they're spending more time on the wrong person rather than speaking to the person who is really interested in purchasing the car. So aggregating all of this information is important, and to fully understand as a marketplace, if you were able to tell the dealer the context of the conversation in itself, whether it's through phone, WhatsApp, or any channel whatsoever, it would greatly help them in improving their selling process and in a way set them up for success in the long run. And that kind of ties to what Anup and everyone's been talking about in terms of like building that relationship with dealer, becoming that trusted partner, so that when everything blows up and when AI becomes so confusing for them to understand, they have someone to come and speak to, the human being that the marketplace has to be in this case, weirdly. But yeah.
So there's a question here, which in a sense is, I think, can be boiled down to, if you're advising dealers in this world, what are the top one or two things you'd advise dealer groups to do to ready themselves for this world? And I guess there's a subsidiary question, which is, are they suddenly going to get deluged with a huge amount more leads and complexity, or are they going to end up with much more finessed leads that are actually much closer to completion? Steve, what do you think on that?
I'll start here. I mean, happy to. So I'm giving this a lot of thought. A lot of our investors are car dealers. I think number one is, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, all website providers started to offer SEO services. I think now we need to figure out these new generative engine optimization, GEO services. So out of the gate, I would start to help dealers just very practically understand, is your website data, is it set up to optimally appeal to chatbots? That's going to be number one, because as I said earlier.
But is it their website data, or is it actually releasing their data from their DMS, their CMS, etc., into this world in some?
Well, I think it's going to be both. I think it's going to be both, right? I think it's a great question. Is like the data that we've had on dealer websites up until now might not be the right data, or might not be the right purification of that data or structure of that data to optimally respond to chatbots. And I think they're going to need a partner for this. The average dealer, like I said earlier, is not going to figure this out themselves. So phase one or phase zero here, right out of the gate, within the next 6 months, you should be consulting with dealers to scrutinize their website, do an audit, and ensure that their website is optimally configured to appeal to chatbots. That's number one. And then number two is just figuring out then that transition, right? When I was with Auto Trader in the US here like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we thought about the consumer path. And I don't think it's changed too much, where, a consumer may start with third-party marketplace, a Google search going to third-party marketplaces, but almost inevitably that consumer ends up on a dealership's website, checking the reputation of the dealer, confirming that the vehicle's actually in stock, checking hours of operation, maybe scheduling a test drive, these kinds of things. So the marketplaces need to think about that consumer journey, if that's going to change, and as it's going to change with chatbots, and what the linkages need to be between the dealership's website and what role it's going to play in the future, and the marketplaces, and just firmly embed themselves to optimize and ensure that these chatbots have access to the dealership websites as well. And I think there will be monetization opportunities to offer those kinds of services.
Brilliant. I'm afraid. Oh, sorry. Shoot.
Sorry.
Martin, I beat you.
Yeah, just a quick point. So we did some analysis, and we saw that dealers and buyers, they tend to spend about 30 seconds of a call trying to figure out which car it is that they're stalking for. Like, if those random little frictions could be removed by, like what you said, Steve, about sharing the data beforehand, helps with the qualification process, and also get straight to the point where we talk about, when can I come and visit the car and take a test drive, instead of the whole, I'm talking about this gray focus for, yeah. So that's something that's very real, and something that we discovered quite recently while we're doing an analysis.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. I'm afraid we have to wrap here. We've gone on a little bit longer than we planned, but we've hardly lost anybody along the way. So thank you all very much for a very informative session. And hopefully you'll come back for another one, because I think the topic is too big for a single webinar. So
Certainly.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Good seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's never enough time, but thank you so much for staying with us. And thank you to our amazing panelists. Thank you to Jonathan, and thank you to Kaisa for sponsoring today. The recording will be available, as we said, in the next few days. Connect with the guys, keep the conversation going, and we'll either see you at Auto Buzz 2026 in Spain, or we'll chat to you before then. Thanks a million. Take care.